Commander Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation window. The blue and green planet below looked peaceful from this distance. Earth spun slowly beneath his ship, white clouds swirling over brown continents and deep blue oceans. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful world held what the Galactic Council called one of the most backward species in known space. Still looking at the primitive world, Jake? Dr. Lisa Hamilton walked up beside him, carrying a thick folder of research papers. Her job was to study new species and decide if they were worth the Council's time. So far, Earth's humans were not impressing anyone. "I keep thinking there's something we're missing," Jake said. He had been watching Earth for 3 weeks now, and something bothered him about the official reports. "Look at their cities, those lights at night. They've covered almost every landmass with settlements." Lisa opened her folder and read from the top page. Species 7842 Terran, also known as humans. They discovered fire only 400,000 years ago. They learned to grow food instead of just hunting only 10,000 years ago. They built their first flying machine less than 200 years ago. Jake, my pet cat, could probably achieve faster technological progress. Captain Alex Porter joined them at the window. He was older than both of them, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many worlds. "I just got the final classification from the Council," he said, waving a data pad. "Primitive plus level. They recommend minimal contact only. The Council thinks it will take these humans 50,000 years before they're advanced enough to matter to anyone." Jake frowned. Something about that number seemed wrong. "How long did it take us to go from discovering fire to space travel?" "About 2 million years," Lisa answered. "Most species take at least 1 million. The humans are actually moving quite fast by normal standards, but they're still incredibly primitive compared to the rest of the galaxy." Alex pulled up a hologram showing Earth's current technology level. "Look at this. They're still using chemical rockets to get into space." "Chemical rockets, Jake. We stopped using those 3 million years ago. Their computers are barely smart enough to add numbers together. Their weapons are metal tubes that throw small pieces of metal really fast." "Bullets," Lisa said. "They call them bullets, can you imagine? They still fight wars by throwing tiny metal objects at each other. The Galactic Council's report says their weapons technology is laughably primitive." Jake watched the hologram rotate, showing Earth's major cities. "But look how many weapons they have. This planet has enough nuclear bombs to destroy itself several times over. What kind of species builds enough weapons to kill everyone on their own world?" "A stupid species," Alex said with a laugh. "The report says they almost destroyed themselves in something called a Cold War. They pointed these weapons at each other for decades, just waiting for someone to start shooting. What civilized species threatens to commit suicide over political disagreements?" Lisa pulled up another file. Their military records are even more disturbing. In the last century alone, they fought 2 massive wars that killed over 100 million of their own kind. They used poison gas, they targeted civilian populations, they even dropped nuclear weapons on cities full of innocent people. No civilized species would ever do such things. "The psychological profiles are fascinating, though," Jake said, reading over her shoulder. "Look at their response to disasters. When their cities flood, they don't evacuate and wait for help. They form groups and start rescuing people themselves. When earthquakes destroy their buildings, they dig through rubble with their bare hands to save strangers. When diseases spread, they volunteer to treat the sick even when they might die themselves." Alex shook his head. "That's just more proof of how primitive they are. Advanced species have technology to handle such problems. We don't risk our lives unnecessarily." "But what if the technology fails?" Jake asked. "Good technology doesn't fail," Lisa said firmly. "That's what makes it good technology. These humans live on a death world, Jake. Look at their planet's history. Ice ages that last thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions that block out the sun. Asteroid impacts that kill most life on the planet. Plagues that wipe out huge portions of their population. Their planet has been trying to kill them since they first evolved." Jake studied the geological records. Earth's history was indeed violent compared to most inhabited worlds. Maybe that's why they're different. Most species evolve on stable, peaceful worlds. Earth seems to specialize in global catastrophes, which explains why they're so aggressive. And paranoid, Alex said. They see threats everywhere because threats are everywhere on their world. They fight each other constantly because they've never known real peace. They build excessive weapons because they're afraid of everything. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks appeared at the observation deck, carrying his own set of reports. Ryan worked in military intelligence, analyzing potential threats to the galaxy. I've been studying their warfare capabilities, he said, joining the group. It's disturbing. Disturbing how? Lisa asked. They have over 200 different countries on one planet, and most of them maintain large military forces. Their total military personnel numbers in the tens of millions. They spend more money on weapons than most entire star systems have in their treasuries. Alex laughed. They're still fighting with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. How dangerous could they possibly be? Ryan's expression was serious. That's what bothers me. Yes, their weapons are primitive by our standards, but they've developed warfare into a science. They have detailed plans for every possible type of conflict. They study battle tactics the way we study poetry. Some of their strategic thinking is actually quite sophisticated. Examples? Jake asked. They have a concept called mutually assured destruction. The idea is that if someone attacks you with nuclear weapons, you respond by launching enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire civilization. Both sides die, so neither side attacks first. That's insane, Lisa said. But it worked, Ryan continued. They avoided nuclear war for decades using this strategy. They also developed something called guerrilla warfare. Small groups using primitive weapons can defeat much larger, better-equipped armies by refusing to fight conventional battles. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? What do you mean? Alex asked. Most galactic species became civilized by overcoming their violent natures. We learned to solve problems with technology and diplomacy instead of warfare. But what if you had a species that never learned to stop fighting? A species that got better at warfare instead of abandoning it? You get humans, Ryan said quietly. A species that treats survival as their primary skill. Lisa closed her folder. Well, it doesn't matter now. The Council has made their decision. Humans are classified as primitives, and we're moving on to survey other systems. In a few thousand years, maybe they'll be advanced enough for proper contact, assuming they don't destroy themselves first, Alex added. Jake took one last look at Earth as their ship prepared to leave the system. Something still bothered him about dismissing humans so easily. Yes, they were primitive by galactic standards. Yes, they were violent and unpredictable. But they were also survivors on a scale that most species couldn't imagine. As the blue planet disappeared behind them, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy might someday regret overlooking these primitive humans. In a universe full of advanced, peaceful civilizations, maybe there was value in having one species that had never learned to stop fighting. But that was a problem for the future. For now, Earth and its primitive inhabitants were forgotten, filed away in the vast databases of the Galactic Council as just another backward species in a galaxy full of wonders. The humans would have to prove themselves worthy of attention. They would get that chance sooner than anyone expected. Admiral Susan Carter was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alert started screaming through the command center. Red lights flashed across every screen, and the urgent beeping sound meant only one thing. Something very bad was happening, somewhere in the galaxy. What's the situation? Susan asked as she hurried to the main display screen. Around her, dozens of officers were frantically typing at their computers, trying to gather information from across the galaxy. Long-range sensors are picking up massive fleet movements in the outer rim, reported Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster. His face was pale as he read the incoming data. Admiral, these aren't normal patrol movements. This looks like a full-scale military mobilization. Susan felt her stomach drop. The outer rim had been quiet for over 300 years. The Zerathi Empire had retreated to their home systems after the last Galactic War and hadn't been heard from since. Most people assumed they had given up their aggressive ways and were living peacefully in isolation. How massive are we talking about? Susan asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Initial counts suggest over 50,000 ships, ma'am, and they're all heading toward the inner systems. Danny's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. These aren't exploration vessels or trade ships. Every one of them is a military warship. Dr. Kevin Walsh rushed into the command center carrying a stack of files and looking more worried than Susan had ever seen him. Kevin ran the Galactic Threat Assessment Division, and it was his job to predict and prepare for exactly this kind of situation. Susan, we have a serious problem, Kevin said, spreading his files across the main table. I've been analyzing the Zarathi fleet movements, and this isn't just some territorial expansion. They're preparing for total galactic conquest. That's impossible, Susan said. The Zarathi agreed to the peace treaties. They've been quiet for centuries. Why would they suddenly decide to restart the old wars? Kevin pulled out a series of photographs taken by deep space reconnaissance drones. Because they've been preparing for this moment ever since they retreated. Look at these images. These aren't the same ships they had 300 years ago. Every vessel in their fleet has been completely redesigned and upgraded. Susan studied the photographs. The Zarathi ships were enormous, far larger than anything in the current galactic defense forces. They had sleek, menacing designs that looked built for one purpose only: destroying everything in their path. Intelligence suggests they've developed new weapons during their isolation, Kevin continued. We're detecting energy signatures we've never seen before. Some of our analysts think they may have created planet crackers. Planet crackers? Susan had heard rumors of such weapons but assumed they were just stories meant to frighten children. Weapons that can actually destroy entire worlds. Not just destroy them, completely shatter them into space dust. We also have reports of biological weapons that can sterilize entire star systems, killing every living thing within light years. Captain Ashley Turner entered the command center at a run. She was in charge of civilian evacuation procedures, which meant her presence could only mean one thing. Admiral, I've received preliminary target lists from our intelligence division. The Zarathi are heading directly for the most populated systems in the galaxy. Including Earth's sector? Susan asked, though she already knew the answer from Ashley's expression. Earth is on the priority target list, ma'am, along with every other inhabited world in the inner systems. Our analysts believe they plan to eliminate all potential resistance before establishing their new empire. Susan looked around the command center at her officers. These were good people, dedicated professionals who had spent their careers maintaining peace in the galaxy, but none of them had ever faced a threat like this. The current galactic defense forces were designed for peacekeeping and minor conflicts, not full-scale warfare against an enemy with superior technology. How long do we have? Susan asked. Based on their current speed and trajectory, the first Zarathi forces will reach the outer colonies in approximately 3 months, Kevin replied. Earth and the other core worlds have maybe 6 months before the main fleet arrives. The war began exactly when Kevin predicted it would. The Zarathi vanguard struck the Centauri colonies without warning, without negotiations, without even a declaration of war. One day the colonies were peaceful farming communities with millions of inhabitants. The next day, they were smoking ruins, floating in space. Captain Danny Foster was commanding a patrol ship near Centauri when the attack happened. He watched through his ship's cameras as the alien vessels appeared out of nowhere and began systematically destroying everything in the system. My God, Danny whispered as he watched entire cities disappear in flashes of brilliant light. They're not even trying to capture anything. They're just killing everyone. The Zarathi weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Massive energy beams that could vaporize a city in seconds. Missiles that seemed to bend space itself as they traveled. Ships that could appear and disappear at will, striking without warning and vanishing before anyone could fight back. Danny tried to call for reinforcements, but the Zarathi had jammed all communications in the system. He tried to evacuate civilians, but there was nowhere to run. The alien fleet had surrounded the entire system and was methodically destroying every ship that tried to escape. In 12 hours, the Centauri colonies were gone. 3 worlds with a combined population of over 2 billion people had been completely wiped out. Not conquered, not occupied, simply erased from existence as if they had never been there at all. The news reached Earth 48 hours later, Emergency sessions were called in every government on the planet. For the first time in human history, the entire species faced the possibility of complete extinction at the hands of an enemy they couldn't even understand. Commander Ashley Turner was put in charge of Earth's evacuation efforts, though everyone knew it was an impossible task. Earth had over 8 billion people, and the entire galactic merchant fleet couldn't carry even a fraction of that number. "We have maybe 4 months before they reach our system," Ashley told the Emergency Council. "I can evacuate perhaps 50 million people if we use every available ship. That leaves over 7.5 billion people with nowhere to go." The math was simple and brutal. Most of humanity would die when the Zerathi arrived. The only question was whether anyone would survive to remember what the human race had been like. Colonel Matt Johnson volunteered to stay behind with the Planetary Defense Forces. He was a career military officer who had spent his life training for wars that never came. Now finally, he would get the chance to put his skills to use, even though everyone knew it was hopeless. "We can't stop them," Matt told his volunteers. "But we can make them pay for what they're doing. Every alien ship we destroy is one less ship that can attack the evacuation convoys." As the last civilian transports lifted off from Earth spaceports, Matt and his remaining forces prepared for the final battle. They had nuclear weapons, conventional military equipment, and the desperate courage of people with nothing left to lose. What they didn't know was that they were about to teach the galaxy the most important lesson in its history. Advanced technology and superior firepower meant nothing when facing an enemy that refused to surrender. The Zerathi were about to learn what happened when you cornered the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. The Zerathi fleet arrived at Earth like a storm of death and darkness. Admiral Vexithera commanded over 2,000 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. From his flagship's bridge, he looked down at the small blue planet and felt nothing but contempt. "Intelligence reports indicate minimal resistance capability," his aide reported. "The primitive inhabitants possess only chemical-based propulsion and crude fission weapons. Our shields can easily deflect anything they might attempt to use against us." Admiral Vexithara nodded. This would be another easy extermination, just like the Centauri colonies and the dozen other systems they had already cleansed. The humans were even more primitive than most species the Zerathi had encountered. This shouldn't take more than a few hours. "Begin the bombardment," Vexithara ordered. "Target the major population centers first. We'll eliminate their leadership and industrial capacity, then finish off the survivors." Colonel Matt Johnson watched the alien fleet through the reinforced windows of his command bunker deep in the Colorado mountains. The underground facility had been built during the Cold War to survive nuclear attacks, but Matt doubted it would protect them from whatever weapons the aliens possessed. "Sir, we're getting reports from observation posts around the globe," Sergeant Amy Rodriguez said from her communication station. "The alien fleet is spreading out over every continent. They're not just targeting military installations. They're positioning to hit civilian areas too." Matt felt a cold anger building in his chest. These aliens weren't just conquering Earth. They were planning to murder every man, woman, and child on the planet. "What's our current force strength?" "We have approximately 200,000 military personnel still on planet," Amy replied. "Most of our heavy equipment was evacuated with the civilian transports, but we still have some aircraft, armor, and plenty of small arms." Dr. Peter Kim looked up from his computer station, where he had been frantically analyzing intercepted alien communications. "Colonel, I've been studying their fleet formations and communication patterns. Their ships are incredibly advanced, but they're not expecting any real resistance from us." "What do you mean?" Matt asked. "They're treating this like a simple extermination operation," Peter explained. "Their ships are spread out, their shields are operating at minimum power, and their weapons are configured for ground bombardment rather than ship-to-ship combat. They think we're completely helpless." The bombardment began at sunrise. Zerathi plasma cannons reached down from orbit like fingers of pure destruction, touching cities and turning them into expanding spheres of superheated gas. New York disappeared, in a flash that could be seen from space. London followed seconds later, then Tokyo, then Moscow. But the humans didn't die quietly. Every military base that survived the initial attack opened fire immediately, launching everything they had at the alien fleet. Nuclear missiles rose from hidden silos, fighter jets screamed up from underground hangars, and artillery batteries that had been dug into mountainsides began hammering the sky with shells. Admiral Vexithara watched in amazement as primitive chemical rockets actually began reaching his ships. The human weapons were laughably weak compared to Zarathi technology, but there were so many of them. The humans were firing everything they possessed, holding nothing back in reserve. "Sir, the humans are using unusual attack patterns," his tactical officer reported. "Their missiles aren't following standard trajectory calculations. They're using randomized flight paths and electronic countermeasures that are confusing our point defense systems." "Impossible," Vexithara said. "Primitives can't have electronic warfare capabilities." But the humans did have such capabilities, learned through decades of developing weapons to fight each other. Their missiles twisted and danced through space, some carrying nuclear warheads, others carrying nothing but electronics designed to jam alien sensors. A few even carried biological weapons that the humans had supposedly banned from warfare, but had kept in secret stockpiles anyway. Major Steve Clark led his squadron of F-22 fighters in the most lopsided air battle in history. 12 primitive, human aircraft against thousands of alien ships that could travel between stars. Steve knew he was going to die, but he was determined to make it count. "Listen up, people," Steve said over the radio to his pilots. "We can't match their technology, but we can do something they don't expect. We're going to ram them." The alien point defense systems were designed to stop missiles and energy weapons. They weren't programmed to deal with piloted aircraft that deliberately flew straight into enemy ships. Steve's squadron managed to destroy 3 Zarathi cruisers and damage a dozen more before the last fighter was shot down. The suicide attacks horrified the watching aliens. No civilized species would deliberately sacrifice their lives in such a manner. It violated every principle of rational military behavior, but the humans kept doing it again and again, using everything from fighter jets to cargo planes loaded with explosives. Dr. Peter Kim worked frantically in his underground laboratory while the battle raged overhead. He had discovered something important about the Zarathi fleet positioning, and he was racing against time to implement his plan before the aliens finished destroying Earth's military forces. "Amy, I need you to send a message to every remaining military unit on the planet," Peter called out. "Tell them to fall back to minimum safe distance and wait for my signal." "What signal?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked. "The biggest explosion in human history," Peter replied. During the Cold War, both superpowers had built thousands of nuclear weapons and hidden them in secret locations around the globe. Most people thought these weapons had been destroyed when the war ended, but Peter had spent years tracking down the forgotten stockpiles, bombs hidden in abandoned military bases, warheads stored in underground bunkers, even nuclear mines that had been planted beneath major cities and forgotten. Peter had found them all, connected them with a network of buried cables and radio transmitters, and turned the entire planet into one massive weapon. If Earth was going to die, it would take as many aliens with it as possible. "Colonel Johnson, this is Dr. Kim," Peter said over the radio. "I'm activating the planetary defense system. You have 60 seconds to reach minimum safe distance." "What planetary defense system?" Matt asked. "The one I just built," Peter replied and pressed the button. Earth died in nuclear fire. Thousands of atomic weapons detonated simultaneously across every continent, creating a chain reaction that split the planet's crust and turned the atmosphere into a ball of radioactive plasma. The explosion was visible from neighboring star systems and completely destroyed half the Zarathi fleet. Admiral Vexithara died when his flagship was caught in the expanding shockwave. His last thought was confusion. How could primitives have caused such destruction? How could a species that hadn't even mastered space travel have nearly destroyed his entire fleet? The surviving Zarathi ships fled the system in panic, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its core. The humans were dead, but they had proven something terrifying. Even the most primitive species could be dangerous if they were desperate enough. Earth was gone, reduced to glowing debris floating in space. But humanity's real war was just beginning. Admiral Nathan Wright woke up from cryosleep feeling like his body had been hit by a truck. The refugee ship had been drifting through space for 8 months, while its passengers slept in frozen suspension. Nathan was one of the 50 million humans who had escaped Earth before the Zerathi arrived, but waking up felt more like a curse than a blessing. "Admiral, you need to see this," said Captain Lucy Barnes, shaking Nathan awake. Her face was pale and her eyes were red from crying. "The galaxy has changed while we were sleeping. It's much worse than we thought." Nathan struggled to sit up in his cryopod. His muscles were weak from months of artificial sleep, but the urgency in Lucy's voice made him push through the pain. "How much worse?" "The Zerathi have conquered 2/3 of known space," Lucy said, helping him stand. "They've destroyed or enslaved every major civilization. The Galactic Coalition is gone. Most species have either surrendered or been wiped out completely." Nathan felt his heart sink as he processed this information. When they had fled Earth, the humans had hoped to find safety with the advanced galactic civilizations. Instead, they had awakened to find themselves among the last free survivors in a galaxy ruled by their enemies. Dr. Angela Foster was waiting for Nathan in the ship's main briefing room. She had spent the journey analyzing all the data they had recorded from Earth's final battle, and her findings were disturbing. Angela was one of the smartest scientists among the human refugees, and if she looked worried, the situation was truly hopeless. "Nathan, I've been studying the recordings from Earth's destruction," Angela said, pulling up holographic displays of the battle. "The Zerathi aren't invincible. They're just more advanced than everyone else. But advancement isn't the same thing as intelligence." "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, still trying to clear his head from the cryosleep drugs. "Look at how they fought," Angela said, replaying footage of the alien attack. "Their tactics were completely predictable. They used overwhelming firepower and direct frontal assaults. They never adapted to our unconventional responses. When our pilots started ramming their ships, they had no idea how to counter such tactics." Nathan watched the recordings of Major Steve Clark's final flight. The human pilot had deliberately crashed his fighter into an alien cruiser, sacrificing his life to destroy a ship worth 1,000 times more than his primitive aircraft. "They've never faced an enemy that fights like we do." "Exactly," Angela said. "Every other species in the galaxy became civilized by abandoning warfare. They solved conflicts through technology and negotiation, but humans never stopped fighting. We just got better at it." General Patricia Hayes joined them in the briefing room. Patricia had been Earth's top military strategist before the evacuation, and now she was the closest thing humanity had to a military leader. Her gray hair and stern expression made her look like someone who had seen too many wars. "I've been talking with representatives from the remaining coalition forces," Patricia said. "They want our help, but they don't understand what kind of help we can provide. They keep asking about our advanced weapons and superior technology." "We don't have advanced weapons," Nathan said. "Everything we owned was destroyed with Earth." "That's exactly my point," Patricia replied with a grim smile. "They still don't understand. Our weapons were never our strength. Our willingness to use them was." The first human counterattack happened 3 weeks later. Captain Tony Miller volunteered to lead a small force of modified cargo ships against a Zerathi supply depot in the Vega system. The alien installation was heavily defended and considered impregnable by conventional military standards. Tony's plan was anything but conventional. Instead of trying to fight the depot's defenses, he loaded his ships with nuclear waste, biological, weapons, and every toxic chemical the human refugees could manufacture. Then he crashed the ships directly into the station's main reactor. The explosion didn't just destroy the supply depot, it contaminated the entire system with radiation and biological agents that made it uninhabitable for decades. The Zerathi had never encountered an enemy that would deliberately poison entire star systems to achieve tactical objectives. "That's barbaric," said Admiral Kethvar of the Coalition Remnant Forces. "No civilized species would use such methods." "We're not civilized," Patricia replied calmly. "That's why we're going to win." Commander Rachel Wells developed the strategies that would define human warfare for the next phase of the galactic conflict. Instead of fighting the aliens directly, she targeted their supply lines, communication networks, and civilian infrastructure. She taught human fighters to hide among asteroid fields and attack merchant convoys. She showed them how to hack alien computer systems using viruses designed on primitive Earth technology. Why attack their battleships when you can attack their food supplies? Rachel explained to a group of coalition officers. Why fight their soldiers when you can fight their families? The Zarathi have conquered the galaxy by being stronger than everyone else. But strength means nothing if you can't protect what you care about. The alien empire began experiencing problems they had never faced before. Supply ships disappeared without warning. Communication relays were sabotaged by explosives planted by invisible attackers. Zarathi colonies found their water supplies contaminated with Earth-based diseases that their medical technology couldn't cure. Dr. Angela Foster made the breakthrough that changed everything. She discovered that human neural patterns could be adapted to work with alien technology, but in ways the original designers never intended. Human brains thought differently than other species, and this difference could be weaponized. Most galactic species solve problems by finding the most elegant, efficient solution, Angela explained. Humans solve problems by finding whatever works, no matter how ugly or brutal it might be. When we interface with alien technology, we use it in ways they never imagined. Human-modified alien weapons were deliberately unreliable, designed to break down at critical moments. Human-modified alien computers contained hidden programs that would activate months later to cause system failures. Human-modified alien ships had hidden weaknesses that could be exploited by anyone who knew the right codes. Within 6 months, the human survivors had taught every remaining free species in the galaxy to fight like humans. The Vorthon Collective, which had surrendered without firing a shot when the Zarathi first attacked, began using guerrilla tactics to reclaim their lost worlds. Captain Tony Miller led the liberation of the Altair system using a force composed entirely of primitive species that the Zarathi had dismissed as harmless. They used chemical weapons, biological agents, cyber warfare, and psychological operations that violated every galactic convention of civilized warfare. The aliens think they're fighting the old galaxy, Tony reported after the victory. They're still using tactics designed to fight civilized enemies who follow the rules. But there are no rules anymore. We're teaching everyone to fight dirty. The news of human tactics spread throughout both the free territories and the occupied systems. Species that had lived as slaves under Zarathi rule began to remember that they had once been warriors too. They started sabotaging their own factories, poisoning their own food supplies, and turning their planets into death traps for their occupiers. Admiral Nathan Wright received reports from across the galaxy showing the same pattern. Wherever humans appeared, the local populations learned to fight back, not with advanced technology or superior firepower, but with the desperate cunning of cornered animals. The Zarathi made one critical mistake, Nathan told the coalition leadership. They assumed that conquering the galaxy would be like their previous wars. But they've never fought humans before. They've never faced an enemy that learned warfare on a world that spent millions of years trying to kill them. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest guns. Sometimes it's the one with nothing left to lose. 10 years after Earth's destruction, Admiral Nathan Wright stood on the bridge of the battleship Retribution, watching the final approach to the Zarathi home system. The ship around him was a strange mixture of human engineering and alien technology, built by the combined efforts of dozens of species who had learned to fight like humans. Admiral, we're detecting massive defensive installations around the Zarathi homeworld, reported Captain Lucy Barnes from her position at the sensor station. Their entire system is one giant fortress. Getting through those defenses will require a direct assault that could cost us millions of lives. Nathan smiled grimly. Lucy was still thinking like the old galactic military, where battles were won through superior firepower and frontal attacks. But humans had taught the galaxy a different way to fight wars. We're not going through their defenses, Lucy, Nathan said. We're going around them. General Patricia Hayes had spent 3 years planning this final assault. She stood in the war room surrounded by holographic displays showing every detail of the Zarathi system. Representatives from 40 different species listened as she explained the battle plan that would end the war. The Zarathi expect us to attack their military installations, Patricia said, pointing to the massive space fortresses that protected their homeworld. Instead, we're going to attack everything else: their power plants, their water treatment facilities, their food distribution centers, their communication networks. That's targeting civilian infrastructure, protested Admiral Kethvar of the Reformed Coalition Forces. Such tactics are prohibited under galactic warfare conventions. The conventions were written by species that never faced extinction, Patricia replied coldly. The Zarathi destroyed our homeworld and tried to exterminate our entire species. They gave up any right to civilized treatment when they chose genocide over conquest. Dr. Angela Foster had developed the weapon that would make the final victory possible. Her team had spent years studying Zarathi biology and psychology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. What they discovered was disturbing but effective. The Zarathi are a highly organized species that depends on central authority for all decision-making, Angela explained to the assault commanders. Their entire society is built around following orders from their emperor. If we can disrupt their command structure, their entire military will collapse into chaos. How do we disrupt an emperor who's protected by the most advanced defenses in the galaxy? Asked Captain Tony Miller. We don't attack him directly, Angela said with a cold smile. We attack his ability to communicate with his forces. I've developed a computer virus based on human neural patterns that will spread through their entire information network. Once it activates, every Zarathi computer system will start receiving contradictory orders. The final battle began not with massive fleets firing at each other across space, but with a single modified cargo ship approaching the Zarathi homeworld. The ship appeared to be carrying surrendering refugees, and the aliens allowed it to dock at their main orbital station. Commander Rachel Wells was aboard that cargo ship with a team of human specialists. Their mission was simple: get inside the Zarathi computer network and upload Angela's virus. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. Remember, we only need 60 seconds of access to their main system, Rachel told her team as they prepared to leave the ship. Once the virus is uploaded, it will spread throughout their entire empire within hours. The Zarathi guards who boarded the cargo ship found exactly what they expected: defeated refugees begging for mercy. They never suspected that the seemingly helpless humans were carrying weapons hidden inside their own bodies, or that their surrender was just another human deception. Rachel's team fought their way to the station's computer core using weapons that were too primitive for Zarathi sensors to detect. Ceramic knives, chemical explosives hidden in medical implants, and biological weapons disguised as medicine. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, the virus was already spreading through their networks. Captain Tony Miller led the main assault force that attacked, while the Zarathi command structure was collapsing into chaos. His fleet wasn't composed of massive battleships, but of thousands of small, fast ships that had been designed to look like civilian vessels. Attack pattern Delta, Tony ordered over the communications channel. Hit everything that looks important, then disappear before they can respond. The human fleet struck like a swarm of angry insects. They targeted power stations, communication relays, food storage facilities, and manufacturing plants. Each individual attack caused minimal damage, but together, they paralyzed the entire Zarathi system. The aliens tried to respond, but their ships were receiving contradictory orders from Angela's virus. Some were told to defend the homeworld, others were ordered to attack the outer planets, and still others received commands to retreat to defensive positions that didn't exist. Wait, Zarathi Emperor died when his palace was destroyed by a kinetic projectile, fired from a modified garbage hauler. The weapon was so primitive that his advanced shields didn't even recognize it as a threat. A simple piece of metal accelerated to high speed, killed the most powerful being in the galaxy. Dr. Angela Foster watched the final assault from the bridge of a hospital ship that was treating wounded from both sides. Even in victory, the humans maintained their medical facilities and treated enemy prisoners with the same care they gave their own people. It's over, Angela said, as reports came in from across the Zarathi system. Their government has collapsed, their military is surrendering, and their empire is dissolving into independent systems. The new Galactic Coalition formed 6 months after the Zarathi surrender. Ambassador Lisa Hamilton, one of the original scientists who had studied Earth decades earlier, presented the Charter of Species rights to representatives from over 300 different civilizations. Never again will any species face extinction because they are considered primitive or inferior, Lisa declared to the assembled delegates. Every form of intelligent life has value, regardless of their technology level or military capability. Captain Jake Morrison, now an elderly man with gray hair and tired eyes, stood at the observation deck of a coalition ship orbiting the rebuilt Earth. The planet lived again, its cities reconstructed using the combined technologies of dozens of grateful species. Hard to believe it's been 20 years since we first discovered this place, Jake said to his companion, Admiral Nathan Wright. Back then we thought the humans were just another primitive species that would take thousands of years to matter to anyone. We were wrong about a lot of things, Nathan replied, watching the blue and green world spin slowly beneath them. We thought advancement meant abandoning warfare. We thought civilization required following rules. We thought primitive meant weak. The memorial wall in Earth's capital city listed the names of every human who had died during the Zarathi War. 8 billion names from the homeworld's destruction, plus millions more who had died in the fighting that followed. But beneath those names was a simple inscription that explained what their sacrifice had accomplished. They taught the galaxy that sometimes strength comes not from what you know, but from what you are willing to do to survive. Earth is gone, but humanity's greatest lesson lives on in every species that learned to fight for their freedom. Commander Jake Morrison took one final look at the rebuilt Earth as his ship prepared to depart for another star system. Somewhere out there were other primitive species, other civilizations that the galaxy might dismiss as backward or unimportant. But now the galaxy knew better. Primitive didn't mean weak. Different didn't mean inferior. And sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one that everyone underestimated. The humans had taught the galaxy that lesson with their blood, their sacrifice, and their absolute refusal to surrender. It was a lesson that would never be forgotten.